and welcome. I'm Claire Rees and I am Jade ThirdEye's Financial Crime Regulatory Specialist. I'm joined today by Stacey Blackwell, who is Head of Financial Crime at Skipton Building Society, and we are going to chat about a couple of brilliant financial crime case studies where Skipton have used Jade ThirdEye to foil the criminals. So thank you for joining us today, Stacey.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
So let's dive straight in. I understand that Skipton have recently uncovered a money laundering ring with the help of Jade ThirdEye. How did that unfold?
So we got information from one of our industry partners sharing intelligence about a potential fraud ring that they'd seen. We then needed to have a look in our systems to look at our customers' database, the transactions that we were seeing, the accounts we were seeing being opened, and see if any of those matched the markers that this industry intelligence was sharing. Unfortunately, we did find some markers that indicated that we were seeing similar activity. What we weren't sure about at that point was whether it was kind of small and isolated, or whether it was part of a much larger criminal enterprise. So we have Jade ThirdEye transaction monitoring, which is fantastic because of its bespoke ability, if you like. And we were able to create a rule that looked for this activity. We could test it very quickly because we have a sandbox environment, so we tested that. So when we put the new rule live, it continued to fire and show us that we were seeing what looked like an organised attack. So we were seeing multiple accounts being opened, using the same sorts of details, same types of customers, same types of amount being deposited, and then a flurry of contact with our contact centre to find out how they could get money out of the society. So we could see that we were having a very similar sort of types of accounts being opened. So it was becoming clearer that this was more organised criminality than it was just an isolated incident.
So what's the next steps then? What happens when you've identified a ring? What do you do with that?
So when we identify this kind of activity, we will work very quickly to restrict those accounts. So if money does arrive into one of those accounts, we can close those accounts or we can restrict access to those accounts, because what we want to do is disrupt this activity as much as possible. Yeah. So if you're a criminal and you've paid £10 of your own money into one of our accounts, for example, and then you've received a much bigger payment, which is actually the proceeds of the scam itself, we want to be able to either capture that money when it arrives with us and stop it moving on, or stop you getting it in the first place. So we kept the rule open, we kept it running, and it continued to spot accounts being opened over the next sort of 12 months. Probably a couple of hundred accounts were opened of a similar nature.
Blimey, that's a lot of activity in a short space of time.
It is.
For a building society.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's just indicative of the nature of financial crime evolving all the time. Criminals are always trying to find a way to use the system to their advantage. If you commit a crime such as fraud or a scam, you have to then clean that money. So somehow you have to get it into the system, you have to move it around a lot so it's really unclear where it came from, who owns it, and then you can start utilising it once it's been fully integrated into the system. So every step of the way, we could either be involved in the initial scam, receiving the funds from that, we could be involved in the later stages of the layering of those proceeds, yeah, or we could end up with the final stage where the money is pulled together in a pool and it's the integration into one of our accounts looking like legitimate savings. So we've got to be really alert to what part of the money laundering chain are we potentially involved in. We do have zero tolerance for facilitating money laundering as an organisation, so we want to be all over it. So it's great to have that flexibility and speed with which you can implement a new rule such as this.
It's great to hear how Jade ThirdEye is being used in anger,
yeah,
to help disrupt financial crime. There has been a new report recently where I've seen an increase in money mule activity happening in non-payment services accounts, and obviously you're already a step ahead. Would you have any advice to other non-payment services firms in terms of managing the risk and keeping a step ahead?
Yeah, I think what I would say to them is don't think that you're immune to these kinds of accounts being opened with your organisation. Just because you might have nominated accounts that have to be set up in order for money to be moved out of your account, that is not stopping these criminals. They are fully aware of what that looks like, and if you think about it from their perspective, doing this makes the layering process look even more convincing because they're moving it to their own name after it's moved through you. So it makes it even cleaner if
Yeah.
you were looking at it from a money laundering perspective.
Of course,
Yeah.
low risk is never no risk.
Exactly.
That's a brilliant example of proactive financial crime prevention. Have you got any more examples of how you've used Jade ThirdEye to help protect the society or your customers?
We have. So one of the rules that we have recently alerted us to a situation where a customer had wanted to move some money. They had been contacted by who they thought was the HMRC and asked to move a significant amount of money to pay a bill. Now, it's an interesting one, this one, and not one we see very often. So this is what we call authorised push payment scams, so the industry will know what that is. I don't need to give you a 101 on it, but it's rare for us to see it because actually we have nominated accounts, so customers have to move money to an account in their own name. And as I said in my previous example, the criminals are wise to that. They kind of know that that might need to happen if they are going to target a Skipton customer. So they're not averse to waiting until that second step can happen and the money's gone into a current account. They're also not averse to opening an account in the customer's name if they can get enough information to pass KYC checks. So the phishing email talking about HMRC had drawn the customer in, given them some confidence that they were actually dealing with the HMRC. Information was shared. It's one of the nastiest types of scams, really, because the victim is persuaded to move the money themselves. So the scammer doesn't access the account with no authority. The scammer persuades the customer to move the money and the customer is thinking it's completely legitimate. So,
and that's devastating for customers to feel as if they've been duped.
Yeah,
in
100%.
That way.
Yeah, it's really awful. That the feeling, I think, from anybody who's been the victim of a fraud, whether it's this kind of fraud or any kind of fraud, is that they can no longer trust themselves to make good decisions financially. How could they have fallen for this? But it really is a crime like any other. We don't talk about victims falling for it. They are subject to and targeted by this type of scam. So yeah, it was really important that we looked at our rules, checked whether we had something that would pick up this activity. Clearly it did in this case. We could then look at them and refine them even further to look at this particular MO to see if there's anything else that we could add to that rule that would have helped us more. In this particular case, we restricted the funds on the account as soon as we spotted this unusual activity, and we then contacted the customer to let them know, we think something's not quite right here. We've restricted your account for your own safety at this stage until we can have a conversation with you to explore exactly what's happening. And we were able to tell the customer, this is actually a scam and we don't want you to send this money. We've restricted your account so it won't go, and the customer's money was ultimately saved in this case.
That's a fantastic outcome for the customer in this case. And I know there are lots of similar cases and lots where it's harder to persuade the customer. Again, what would you say to another firm facing similar challenges?
I think the thing for all firms is to consider the FCA's recent guidance around delaying payments. So, you know, they are really keen for us to make the right decisions, to protect our customers, to make sure that people aren't subject to these kinds of scams because we're not taking some action. The conversations can be really challenging, and occasionally we have no alternative but to allow the money to go. But I think organisations like ours can really, because we know our customers so well, can really make a difference. And very often we are able to persuade customers not to send money where we believe it's a scam. So yeah, really successful outcome in this case.
Good work and fantastic team I know you've got here, Stacey. Thank you for talking to us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
Jade is a proud member of the Skipton Group, and we work with institutions in the UK, Australia and New Zealand and help them to prevent financial crime using our transaction monitoring, customer screening and case management system. If you'd like to learn more about how Jade ThirdEye can help protect your organisation from financial crime, then check us out on LinkedIn, have a look at our website at jadethirdeye.com or reach out to one of our team directly. Thanks for joining us today.